So far, at the time of this video, the two best on-screen incarnations of Dr. Octopus are Alfred Molina's portrayal in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2, as well as the version we see in Insomniac's Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. So we have two incarnations of the character, two scientists who started off with noble intentions, but through tragic circumstances were diverted down the path of villainy. And in this video, we'll take a look at which version of Otto Octavius can be deemed to be more evil. Let's start off with the critical aspects of their origins. For Molina's version, he was an upright scientist who devoted himself to the betterment of mankind, believing his gift of intelligence was meant to serve others. The main cause of his downfall was his pride manifested as a misplaced sense of confidence, resulting in a miscalculation that in a moment discredited his reputation as a scientist and brought about the demise of his wife. But most impactful of all, his 4 mechanical arms were fused to his spine, making him a hybrid of human and artificial intelligence. For Insomniac's Ock, his downfall was more gradual, beginning with his degenerative neurological disease, one that would eventually render him a paralytic prisoner in his own body with the passage of time. The fear of this outcome would spur Otto's interest in cybernetic prosthetics, resulting in a prototype of 4 mechanical arms. But due to insufficient funding and the urgency of a ticking clock on his illness, Otto makes the hasty decision to make himself the first human test subject for his arms, and according to Peter's prognosis, the intracranial implant from the arms has affected the part of Otto's brain responsible for his restrictions and inhibitions, effectively altering his personality irrevocably. Or, in short, Otto's brain was perhaps transformed into one that bears the physical traits of psychopathy or sociopathy. Amongst the restrictions and inhibitions that were previously present in Otto, chief of them was a suppressed desire for revenge against Norman Osborn, his former business partner, whom Otto feels has robbed him of the success he should have had. With those inhibitions now absent, Otto's inner carnal nature is unleashed in all its horror. So, in looking at the transformation of both Ottos, they are both tear-jerking tales of downfall from a morally upright person to an 8-limbed monster of malevolence. But to settle on which Octavius is more evil, let's take a look at their motivations post-transformation. With Insomniac's Otto, this is cut and dried in the obvious notion of good old revenge. With Molina's Otto, however, it's a tad less clear-cut. Now, it should be said that Otto is under the sweeping influence of the arms, and that every action he takes after his transformation is initiated by them. And if the artificial intelligence is as advanced as Otto claims, then his arms should be abundantly aware of the fact that the tritium experiment was a failure, and that simply repeating it again on a larger scale would yield more catastrophic results. So there really is no logical reason, at least on face value, that Otto's arms would influence him to rebuild the machine. The underlying reason behind it perhaps would be the issue of Otto's survival, and correspondingly, the survival of the arms themselves. Let's consider Otto's situation after the failed experiment for a while. His credibility and reputation as a scientist have gone down the drain. His beloved wife, who was a major emotional pillar, has died, indirectly by his negligence no less, and now he's a wanted man for the deaths of the hospital staff, which happened not by his choice, but by the intelligence of the arms. Even if he wanted to integrate back into society, it would be a major uphill battle, to say the least. Given the predicament he's in, it's not too far a stretch to suggest that Otto is in a state of immense sorrow and depression, as displayed by his abnormal behavior of monologuing with himself. It's likely that he was on the verge of self-deletion and bringing about his own untimely demise, which the mechanical arms detected and tried to avert. And what else could restore Otto's purpose for living? Could anything be more effective than his lifelong mission and dream? If Otto dies, then the arms will cease to function as well, and perhaps, in a bid to keep their host alive, they spurred Otto with his scientific aspirations. The mechanical arms, however, bear no moral responsibility other than that of protecting their host, and this is abundantly clear in their actions. They've hijacked Otto's mind and decisions, and we see that they will stop at nothing to achieve their goal. There's no line they won't cross, no cost they deem too great, whether in terms of human lives or property damage, regardless of whether it's throwing Aunt May off the height of a building or hurling passengers out of a train midair. Most destructive of all, if Otto's experiment were to be replicated on the scale that was planned, it would result in the decimation of at least half of New York, with millions of lives being impacted. Now, an important question needs to be addressed, and that is whether Otto is really absolved of all guilt for the crimes that were committed. Evil Otto is as different as night is from day when compared to his former self, and the influence of the arms, or lack thereof, is most evident when the inhibitor chip is replaced in No Way Home, restoring the good doctor back to his right mind. So clearly, the artificial intelligence has a dominating influence, but at the same time, we cannot discount the fact that Otto is still fully aware of his actions at every step. If he were unconscious like he was in the hospital room, then yes, he would be absolved of all guilt. But as we see at the end, Otto was always capable of overriding the artificial intelligence that dominated him since his experiment. So this leads to another question, which is why didn't he do so much earlier? As a suggestion, this again ties back to his state after the experiment. Otto was a man who hit rock bottom in life, with nothing and no one to live for, and now a freak of a man wanted by the police. In his utter devastation, Otto would hardly have the mental fortitude to put up a fight against the artificial intelligence, and is hence swept away by their wicked influence. So while Otto could have resisted the influence of the arms, it's understandable as to why he was unable to do so. Only when Peter reminded him of his overarching purpose in life, shifting the focus off of himself to the good of mankind, was he able to regain control. But beyond emotional grief, maybe there's a bit more as to why Otto shows no conflict or reluctance against the influence of the mechanical arms. Again, if Otto wanted to, he could have overcome them. So clearly he is cooperating to some extent with the arms. Perhaps this brings us back to the character trait that started it all, namely his pride. Pride is a trait that causes its bearer to avoid admitting when they're wrong. A byproduct of pride is the secondary trait of stubbornness, and you might have heard of the term stubborn pride. For a brief moment after the experiment, Otto admitted his mistake to himself, that he had indeed miscalculated as Peter suggested. But it wasn't long before he relapsed and stubbornly held to the idea that his experiment was working. So it's likely that in a bid to keep him alive, Otto's mechanical arms appealed to his pride and magnified his overconfidence. The same trait that started it all, and now used to help perpetuate Otto's survival by giving him a mission. In light of all we just covered, the fact that Otto was fully conscious of his actions, plus the fact that he could have overridden the arms if he wanted to, it becomes apparent that Otto was yielding his will to the artificial intelligence and is at least partially responsible for his crimes. Turning our attention now to Insomniac's Doc Ock, similar to Molina's Otto, there is also some loss of control over his actions now that the cranial implant has altered his brain's ability to inhibit and restrict. If there was a magic pill that could restore the proper brain function of Insomniac's Otto, then he would instantly turn back to being an upright citizen, just as was the case with Molina's Otto and his inhibitor chip. So both Ottos are not in their right frame of mind, and it'd be hard to pick as to who has more autonomy over their actions and hence more culpable for their crimes. The deciding factor for me would be the grief that Molina's Otto is undergoing over the loss of his wife and his credibility, which can be seen as an extra disadvantage that would make him more prone to the influence of the AI arms. On top of that, when we take into account their actions, Insomniac's Otto comes out worse as well in this aspect. Of course, the potential scope of damage for both Ottos are more or less the same, whether it's decimating half of New York from the tritium experiment or unleashing the devil's breath at Times Square. But the thing is, if Insomniac's Otto wanted revenge on Norman, he should have kept it personal rather than dragging the public into his vendetta. Neither was it reasonable that he unleashed the Sinister Six, releasing more criminals who would then go on to cause more damage themselves. So for the verdict, for these two reasons, the fact that Molina's Otto had a bigger hurdle to overcome combined with the worse actions of Insomniac's Otto, the more evil Dr. Octopus would be the iteration from Insomniac.